She thought she had the perfect life until a manila envelope revealed that everyone she trusted was systematically destroying everything she'd built. Maya had always been the kind of person who made everything look easy. At 31, she walked into her downtown office every morning wearing clothes that looked expensive but weren't really. She had learned the art of shopping smart, finding pieces that looked like they cost twice what she actually paid. Her desk was always organized, her presentations were smooth, and she could close deals with clients who initially seemed impossible to please. Everyone at the marketing company thought Maya had it all figured out. She was the director of client relations, a position she had worked incredibly hard to reach. Her colleagues would often joke that Maya could sell ice to people living in the mountains. She had this natural way of making people feel comfortable, of understanding exactly what they needed to hear. But that Tuesday started differently than usual. Maya arrived at work feeling unsettled, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. She had been having trouble sleeping lately, and there was this nagging feeling in the back of her mind that something wasn't right in her life. She brushed it off as work stress and grabbed her usual coffee from the machine in the break room. Around 10 in the morning, her assistant knocked on her office door. "Maya, there's a delivery for you. The guy said it's urgent and needs your signature only." She signed for the large manila envelope, thanking the delivery person before closing her door again. The envelope felt heavy in her hands, and there was no return address she recognized. Inside, there were photographs and documents that made her hands shake slightly as she flipped through them. These weren't random papers. They were detailed reports, surveillance photos, and financial records. Someone had been watching her life very carefully, documenting things she didn't even know were worth documenting. The photographs showed her boyfriend Ryan in places she didn't remember him mentioning. There he was, having lunch with her business partner Jessica at a restaurant across town. Another photo showed him coming out of a building she didn't recognize, talking on his phone with what looked like an intense expression. There were timestamps on everything, going back several months. Maya felt her stomach drop as she continued looking through the materials. Financial records showed transactions she had never seen before, money moving in and out of accounts connected to her business. Small amounts at first, but gradually getting larger over time. The numbers were carefully highlighted, with notes written in neat handwriting explaining what each transaction might mean. She had hired a private investigator 3 months ago, but only because Ryan had been acting strange. He would get mysterious phone calls and step outside to take them. He started working late more often, but when she called his office, they said he had left hours earlier. Little things that individually didn't mean much, but together had started to worry her. The investigator, a woman named Patricia, had come recommended by a friend who had used her services during a difficult divorce. Patricia was professional and understanding, explaining that most of her cases turned out to be nothing serious. "Usually it's just people being private about surprise parties or new job interviews," she had said with a reassuring smile. But what Patricia had discovered was far more serious than Maya had expected. The investigation had started simple, just following Ryan for a few days to see where he went and who he met with. But as Patricia dug deeper, she found connections that Maya never could have imagined. Ryan wasn't just being secretive about his activities. He was actively working with people Maya trusted, people she considered close friends and business partners. The photos showed him meeting regularly with Jessica, who had been Maya's best friend since college and was now her partner in the marketing business they had built together. Even more disturbing were the financial records Patricia had somehow obtained. Money was being moved around in ways that made no sense for legitimate business purposes. Small amounts were being transferred to accounts Maya had never heard of, always just under the amounts that would trigger automatic reporting requirements. As Maya studied the documents, she began to see a pattern that made her feel sick. Every major business decision she had made in the past year had somehow been anticipated by their competitors. Deals she thought were confidential had been undercut by other companies who seemed to know exactly what she was planning to propose. Client information that should have been private had somehow made its way to their rivals. She remembered the conversation she had with Jessica just last week about expanding their business. Jessica had seemed enthusiastic, even suggesting they should move faster than Maya had originally planned. Now, looking at the financial records, Maya could see that Jessica had been setting up accounts and moving money around for months, preparing for something Maya wasn't aware of. The most painful discovery was a series of documents showing that Ryan had been researching her business and personal finances long before they had even met. Their romantic meeting at that networking event 2 years ago hadn't been the coincidence he had always claimed it was. He had known exactly who she was and had positioned himself to meet her. Maya sat in her office for over an hour, going through every piece of evidence Patricia had gathered. Her hands were shaking by the time she finished reading everything. The people she trusted most in the world had been systematically planning something that involved her business, her money, and her life, but had deliberately kept her out of the conversation. She realized that while she had been working hard to build what she thought was a successful business and a happy relationship, the people closest to her had been building something entirely different. They had been using her trust, her work, and her success as tools in a plan she was never supposed to discover. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was realizing how many signs she had missed, how many times she had made excuses for behavior that now seemed obviously suspicious. She had been so focused on maintaining her image of having everything together that she had, ignored her own instincts when they tried to warn her that something was wrong. Maya looked around her office, the space she had worked so hard to earn, filled with awards and photos from successful campaigns. Everything she had built suddenly felt fragile, like it could disappear at any moment. Because now she understood that while she had been building her career and her life honestly, other people had been building their plans around taking it all away from her. She put all the documents back in the envelope and locked them in her desk drawer. She needed time to think, to figure out what to do next. But one thing was clear. She could never look at Ryan or Jessica the same way again. The perfect life she thought she had been living was about to change forever. 3 months before Maya received that life-changing envelope, she had been living in what felt like a perfect bubble. Her relationship with Ryan seemed solid, and her business partnership with Jessica was thriving. They had just landed their biggest client yet, and everything appeared to be going exactly as planned. But then the small things started happening. It began with Ryan's phone habits. He had always been the type of person who answered calls right away, even during dinner or while watching movies together. But suddenly, he started stepping outside whenever certain calls came in. When Maya asked about it, he would smile and say it was just work stuff that he didn't want to bore her with. She believed him because why wouldn't she? Trust was the foundation of their relationship. Then there were the late nights. Ryan worked as a financial consultant, so irregular hours weren't completely unusual. But these late nights were different. He would tell Maya he had to stay at the office to finish important reports. But when she tried to surprise him with dinner one evening, the security guard at his building said Ryan had left hours earlier. When she mentioned this to Ryan later, he looked confused for just a second before explaining that he had gone to meet a client at their office instead. Maya wanted to believe these explanations, but something in her gut kept telling her that the pieces weren't fitting together properly. She started noticing other small changes too. Ryan seemed more interested in her business meetings than he used to be. He would ask detailed questions about which clients she was meeting with and what projects she was working on. At first, she thought it was sweet that he was taking more interest in her career. But then their competitors started making moves that seemed almost impossible without inside information. Maya's company would spend weeks preparing a detailed proposal for a potential client, only to lose the contract to someone who had somehow known exactly what to propose and at what price. It happened once, then twice, then 3 times in 2 months. Jessica seemed just as frustrated as Maya about these losses. She would stay late at the office, going through their security procedures and trying to figure out how their information might be getting leaked. She suggested they limit who had access to sensitive client information, and even proposed hiring a security consultant to review their systems. Maya appreciated how seriously Jessica was taking the problem. The breaking point came during a particularly important presentation. Maya and Jessica had been working for months to land a contract with a major retail chain. The client had specific needs, and Maya had developed a unique marketing strategy that she was confident would win them the deal. She had only shared the full details with Jessica, and had mentioned some general information to Ryan over dinner one night. The presentation went well, and Maya left feeling optimistic. But 3 days later, she received a call saying they had lost the contract. The winning company had proposed almost the exact same strategy Maya had presented, but with a slightly lower price. and a faster timeline. It wasn't just similar, it was nearly identical to her idea, down to some very specific creative elements she had developed. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how someone could have known so much about her proposal. She had been careful about who she shared information with, and her team was small and trustworthy. The only people who knew the complete strategy were herself, Jessica, and partially Ryan from their casual dinner conversations. She started paying closer attention to the patterns around her. Maya noticed that Ryan would often ask her about meeting locations and times, saying he wanted to make sure he could reach her if needed. She realized that Jessica had been encouraging her to share more details about client meetings, suggesting it would help them work more efficiently as partners. Maya also began to notice that some of her personal information seemed to be more widely known than it should be. People she barely knew at networking events would mention details about her business plans or personal life that she didn't remember sharing. It was subtle, but once she started looking for it, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The financial irregularities took longer to discover. Maya had always trusted Jessica to handle much of the day-to-day financial management of their business. Jessica was detail-oriented and had a background in accounting, so it made sense for her to oversee the books. Maya focused more on client relationships and creative strategy. But when Maya decided to review their financial records more carefully, she found transactions she didn't recognize. Small amounts of money were being transferred to accounts she had never heard of. When she asked Jessica about them, Jessica had explanations that sounded reasonable. Payments to freelance contractors, fees for services Maya didn't handle directly, deposits for future projects. Maya wanted to trust these explanations, but she had learned to listen to her instincts more carefully. She started keeping her own records of major transactions and comparing them to what Jessica reported. The discrepancies were small at first, but they were definitely there. The most disturbing discovery came when Maya checked their client payment records. Several clients had made payments that were larger than what appeared in their internal accounting. The difference was always small enough that it might have been explained as processing fees or taxes. But when Maya added them up over several months, the missing money was significant. She realized that if someone was systematically stealing small amounts from their business, they would need inside knowledge of exactly how much money was coming in and when. They would also need access to the accounts and the trust of clients who might ask questions about payment processes. Maya spent weeks quietly investigating on her own, trying to understand what was happening to her business and her relationship. She created separate records that she kept at home, documenting every suspicious transaction and every strange conversation. She started paying attention to who knew what information and when. The evidence was mounting, but Maya still couldn't believe that the people closest to her would deliberately deceive her. She kept hoping there would be innocent explanations for everything she was discovering. But as the evidence continued to grow, she realized she needed professional help to understand what was really happening. That was when Maya decided to hire Patricia, the private investigator. She told herself it was just to put her mind at ease, to prove that her suspicions were wrong. But deep down, she was starting to understand that the perfect life she thought she had been living was built on lies she was only beginning to uncover. That Tuesday evening, Maya sat in her car in the parking garage for almost 20 minutes before going back up to the office. She had spent the entire day processing everything Patricia had uncovered, and now she knew what she had to do. The evidence was overwhelming, and she couldn't pretend anymore that there were innocent explanations for what had been happening. Jessica was still in the office when Maya called her extension. "Hey, are you busy? I wanted to talk to you about something important. There's a potential new client situation that just came up, and I think we need to discuss strategy tonight, while the details are still fresh in my mind." Maya kept her voice normal, professional, the same tone she had used in hundreds of previous conversations with her business partner. 20 minutes later, Jessica knocked on the conference room door carrying her laptop and a cup of coffee. She looked tired but interested, exactly the way she always looked when they had important business to discuss. Maya had spread several folders across the large conference table, but she had positioned them so Jessica couldn't see the contents from the doorway. "This new opportunity sounds exciting," Jessica said, settling into her usual chair across from Maya. "What kind of client are we talking about?" She opened her laptop, ready to take notes the way she always did during their strategy sessions. Maya looked at her business partner and oldest friend. This person she had trusted with everything important in her professional life. Jessica's expression was open and curious, showing no sign that she suspected anything unusual about this late evening meeting. For a moment, Maya almost couldn't go through with what she had planned. "Actually, before we get started, would you mind locking the door?" Maya said with a smile that felt strange on her face. "I don't want interruptions. This conversation is going to need our complete attention, and I'd rather not have anyone walking in on us unexpectedly." Jessica looked slightly puzzled but got up and turned the lock on the conference room door. "Must be a really big opportunity if you're this concerned about privacy," she said, returning to her seat. "I'm intrigued." Maya took a deep breath and opened the first folder. Inside were the photographs Patricia had taken over the past 3 months. She spread them across the table slowly, watching Jessica's face carefully as each image became visible. Photos of Jessica and Ryan having lunch together. Pictures of them meeting at locations Maya had never heard them mention. Images of Jessica entering and leaving buildings that had nothing to do with their business. "I want to talk to you about these meetings you've been having," Maya said quietly, keeping her voice steady despite the way her heart was racing. "The ones you never mentioned to me." Jessica stared at the photographs for several long seconds. Maya could see her mind working, probably trying to come up with explanations that would make sense. Finally, Jessica looked up with an expression of confusion that seemed genuine. "Maya, I don't understand what this is about. Yes, I've had lunch with Ryan a few times. He's your boyfriend and we're friends too. I didn't think I needed to report every casual meal to you." She picked up one of the photos, examining it more closely. "And some of these places are near clients I've been meeting with. I don't see why this is suspicious." Maya had expected this response. She opened the second folder, revealing the financial documents Patricia had helped her organize. Bank statements, transaction records, account information for businesses Jessica had set up without Maya's knowledge. The evidence was laid out clearly, with notes explaining what each document revealed about money being moved around behind Maya's back. "What about these accounts?" Maya asked, pointing to the highlighted transactions. "Can you explain why money from our clients has been going into accounts I've never heard of? Small amounts at first, but getting larger over time?" Jessica's confident expression began to crack as she looked at the financial records. Maya could see the moment when Jessica realized how much Maya had discovered. The color drained from Jessica's face and she set down the photograph she had been holding. "I can explain this," Jessica said, but her voice sounded different now, less certain. "Some of these are legitimate business expenses that I've been handling separately to keep our main accounts cleaner. Others are, well, it's complicated, but it's not what it looks like." Maya opened the third folder, revealing more photographs and documents that showed the full scope of what had been happening. Pictures of Jessica meeting with their competitors, copies of emails between Jessica and Ryan discussing Maya's business plans, evidence of information being shared that had directly led to their losing several important contracts. "Jessica, I trusted you with everything," Maya said, her voice becoming quieter as the weight of the betrayal settled over the room. "We built this business together. I shared every plan, every strategy, every client detail with you because I thought we were partners. I thought we were friends." Jessica stared at the evidence spread across the table. Maya could see her trying to calculate what to say, how much to admit, whether there was still a way to explain everything away. The silence stretched between them, filled with years of friendship and partnership that suddenly felt like they had been built on lies. "How long has this been going on?" Maya asked when Jessica didn't respond. "How long have you and Ryan been planning this together?" "It's not what you think," Jessica finally said. But the words sounded hollow even to her. "It started as something completely different. Ryan approached me months ago with concerns about your decision-making. He was worried that you were taking risks that could hurt the business, and he asked me to keep an eye on things." Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach as Jessica continued talking. "He showed me some patterns in your behavior that seemed concerning. Late payments to vendors, client relationships that seemed unstable, financial decisions that didn't make sense. He was worried about your judgment, Maya. We both were. So you decided to steal from our clients and share our business information with competitors because you were worried about my judgment?" Maya asked, her voice growing stronger as anger began to replace the hurt. Jessica's carefully constructed explanation began to fall apart as Maya pressed for details. The story kept changing. First, they were protecting Maya from her own poor decisions. Then they were trying to gather evidence of problems they were concerned about. Then they were planning to confront Maya with their concerns, but wanted to be sure of their facts first. With each new explanation, Maya could see more clearly how much planning had gone into deceiving her. This wasn't a recent decision or a spur-of-the-moment mistake. Jessica and Ryan had been systematically working together to undermine her business and her life for months, maybe longer. "I want to know everything," Maya said, closing the folders and looking directly at Jessica. "I want to know how this started, how long it's been going on, who else is involved, and what you were planning to do next. And I want the truth, Jessica, not another story designed to make me feel sorry for you or to minimize what you've done." The conversation that followed lasted for almost 3 hours. Jessica initially continued trying to minimize her actions and blame circumstances or other people. But as Maya methodically went through each piece of evidence, asking specific questions and pointing out contradictions in Jessica's explanations, the truth finally began to emerge. Maya learned that her entire relationship with Ryan had been planned from the beginning. He had researched her business success and deliberately positioned himself to meet her at that networking event. Jessica had been recruited into the plan later, initially just to provide information about Maya's business activities, but eventually becoming a full partner in what amounted to a systematic plan to take over everything Maya had built. The next few weeks felt like Maya was living in a completely different world than the one she had known just a month before. Every morning she would wake up and for just a few seconds she would forget what had happened. Then reality would crash back over her, and she would remember that everything she thought she knew about her life had been a carefully constructed lie. She decided to confront Ryan on a Friday evening, choosing a time when she knew he would be relaxed and unprepared. Maya had spent the entire week planning exactly how to approach the conversation. She knew that unlike Jessica, who had eventually broken down and confessed, Ryan would be much more difficult to crack. He was smoother, more calculating, and had been lying to her face for much longer. Maya prepared for the confrontation by organizing all of Patricia's evidence into a clear timeline. She wanted to be able to show Ryan exactly when each deception had occurred, making it impossible for him to claim he couldn't remember or that events had happened differently than she thought. She practiced staying calm in front of the mirror, knowing that Ryan would try to manipulate her emotions if she gave him the chance. When Ryan arrived at her apartment that Friday night, he was carrying flowers and a bottle of wine, acting like this was just another romantic evening together. Maya watched him move around her kitchen with the familiarity of someone who had been there hundreds of times, and she felt sick thinking about how he had been playing a role during every single one of those visits. "I need to talk to you about something important," Maya said, gesturing for him to sit down at her dining table. She had already laid out some of the photographs face down, so he couldn't see them yet but would know this wasn't a casual conversation. Ryan's expression immediately became more guarded, though he tried to maintain his usual charming smile. "That sounds serious. Is everything okay with work? I know you've been stressed about some of the client situations lately." Even now, he was trying to steer the conversation toward topics he could control. Maya turned over the first photograph, showing Ryan and Jessica together at a restaurant she had never been to. "I want you to tell me about your relationship with Jessica. And this time I want the complete truth about what you two have been planning behind my back." Ryan looked at the photograph for a long moment, and Maya could see him calculating his response. Unlike Jessica, who had seemed shocked and unprepared when confronted, Ryan appeared to have been expecting this conversation eventually. His reaction was too controlled, too calm for someone who was genuinely surprised. "Maya, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding," he said, picking up the photograph to examine it more closely. "Yes, Jessica and I have talked privately sometimes, but it's only because we've both been concerned about you. You've been under so much stress lately, and we've been trying to figure out how to help you." Maya had expected this approach. Ryan was going to try to position himself and Jessica as the caring friends who were only trying to protect her. She turned over more photographs showing Ryan at locations he had never mentioned to her, meeting with people she didn't recognize. "What about these meetings?" Maya asked. "Who are these people you've been spending time with, and why didn't you ever mention them to me?" Ryan's explanations became more elaborate as Maya revealed more evidence. Each photograph required a new story. Each document demanded a more complex justification. Maya listened patiently, taking notes and asking follow-up questions that made it clear she wasn't going to accept simple explanations. As the conversation continued, Maya began to see patterns in how Ryan operated that she had never noticed before. He would start with a reasonable-sounding explanation, but when pressed for details, his story would become more complicated and less believable. He was skilled at shifting the conversation away from facts and toward emotions, trying to make Maya feel guilty for not trusting him. But Maya had learned to recognize these manipulation tactics during her weeks of investigation. Every time Ryan tried to make her feel bad for questioning him, she would redirect the conversation back to specific evidence. When he attempted to blame other people or circumstances for his actions, she would ask for concrete details that he couldn't provide. The breakthrough came when Maya showed Ryan the financial records documenting money being moved between accounts he shouldn't have had access to. Unlike the photographs, which could potentially be explained away as coincidental meetings, the financial evidence was much harder to dismiss. Ryan stared at the documents for several minutes, and Maya could see the moment when he realized how much she had discovered. His careful composure finally cracked, and for the first time in their entire relationship, Maya felt like she was seeing the real person behind the charming facade he had always presented. "How long have you known?" Ryan asked quietly, setting down the financial records and looking directly at her for the first time that evening. "Long enough to understand that our entire relationship has been built on lies," Maya replied. "What I want to know now is why. Why did you target me specifically? What was the plan? And how long were you going to keep lying to my face?" What Ryan told her over the next 2 hours was worse than anything Maya had imagined. Her relationship hadn't just been fake. It had been a carefully planned business operation from the very beginning. Ryan had spent weeks researching her company and her personal life before engineering their first meeting at that networking event. He had studied her personality, her business practices, and her social connections, looking for weaknesses he could exploit. The romantic relationship was always intended to be temporary, lasting only long enough to gain access to her business information and financial resources. Maya learned that she hadn't been Ryan's first target. He had successfully executed similar plans with other business owners, always working with inside partners who could provide ongoing access to information and resources. Jessica hadn't been recruited randomly. Ryan had specifically chosen her because of her close relationship with Maya and her access to the company's financial systems. The plan had been to gradually drain money from Maya's business while simultaneously feeding information to competitors, weakening her company's market position. Once Maya's business was struggling financially and losing clients, Ryan and Jessica intended to offer to buy her out at a fraction of what the company was actually worth. Maya realized that every romantic gesture, every supportive conversation, every moment of intimacy they had shared had been calculated to serve this larger plan. Ryan had never cared about her as a person. She had simply been a business opportunity disguised as a relationship. As Ryan continued explaining the details of how he had manipulated her, Maya felt something unexpected happening. Instead of becoming more devastated with each revelation, she began to feel a strange sense of relief. Finally, she was hearing the truth about what had been happening in her life. She understood now why she had felt so unsettled in recent months, why her instincts had been telling her that something was wrong. Her subconscious mind had been picking up on inconsistencies and lies that her conscious mind had been making excuses for. By the time Ryan finished explaining everything, Maya felt like she was meeting him for the first time. The person she had thought she loved had never actually existed. He had been a character created specifically to deceive her. But instead of feeling destroyed by this realization, Maya felt something she hadn't expected. She felt free from the constant worry about whether she was good enough for Ryan, free from the nagging feeling that something was wrong in her relationship, free from the exhausting effort of trying to maintain a perfect life that had never been real in the first place. 6 months after that life-changing confrontation, Maya barely recognized her own life. But this time, the unfamiliarity came from positive changes rather than painful discoveries. She had moved to a smaller apartment across town, one that felt more like home than the expensive place she had shared with Ryan. The new space was cozy and comfortable, decorated with things she actually liked rather than items chosen to impress other people. The legal proceedings had been emotionally draining but ultimately successful. Patricia had helped Maya document everything carefully, and the evidence was so overwhelming that both Ryan and Jessica had eventually accepted plea agreements rather than risk going to trial. Maya would never get back all the money they had stolen, but she recovered enough to stabilize her business and move forward. More importantly, Maya had learned to trust her instincts again. Working with Patricia throughout the investigation had taught her how to recognize warning signs she had previously ignored. She now knew the difference between healthy privacy in relationships and secretive behavior that indicated deception. Maya's business had initially suffered when the truth about Jessica's betrayal became public. Some clients were concerned about the company's stability, and Maya had to work hard to rebuild confidence in her ability to protect sensitive information. But the experience had also taught her valuable lessons about security and trust that made her business stronger. In the long run, she brought in new partners after carefully vetting them through multiple background checks and reference conversations. Maya also implemented new financial oversight procedures that required multiple people to approve significant transactions. She had learned that trusting people didn't mean she had to be naive about protecting her business interests. The hardest part of rebuilding hadn't been the practical challenges. It had been learning to trust her own judgment again. For months after the confrontations with Ryan and Jessica, Maya second-guessed every decision she made and every person she met. She wondered constantly whether she was being too suspicious or not suspicious enough. Patricia had recommended a counselor who specialized in helping people recover from betrayal trauma. Maya was initially reluctant to seek therapy, feeling like she should be strong enough to handle the situation on her own. But she quickly learned that processing this kind of complex emotional manipulation required professional guidance. Through counseling, Maya discovered that her tendency to ignore red flags hadn't been a character flaw. It had been a learned behavior from growing up in a family that prioritized keeping peace over addressing problems directly. She had been taught to make excuses for other people's behavior and to blame herself when relationships didn't work smoothly. Understanding these patterns helped Maya develop healthier ways of evaluating the people in her life. She learned to pay attention to how people's actions matched their words, and to trust her feelings when something seemed inconsistent or unclear. Maya also began speaking at business conferences about corporate fraud and personal betrayal. Her first presentation was terrifying. Standing in front of a room full of strangers and talking about the most painful experience of her life felt impossible. But the response was overwhelming. Dozens of people approached her afterward to share their own stories of being deceived by business partners or romantic interests. She realized that her experience, while extremely painful, was far from unique. Many successful people had been targeted by individuals who saw their success as an opportunity for exploitation. By sharing her story, Maya was helping others recognize similar patterns and protect themselves from similar schemes. The speaking engagements led to consulting opportunities. Companies began hiring Maya to review their internal security procedures and help them identify potential vulnerabilities to insider threats. She developed training programs that taught business owners how to maintain appropriate trust while implementing protective safeguards. Maya found this work incredibly fulfilling because it allowed her to transform her painful experience into something that could help other people. Every time she prevented someone else from going through what she had endured, she felt like her suffering had served a meaningful purpose. Dating again had been the most challenging part of rebuilding her life. Maya met interesting people through her work and social activities, but for a long time, she couldn't imagine trusting anyone enough to build a serious relationship. Every new person felt potentially dangerous, and every romantic gesture seemed like it might be manipulative. Her counselor helped Maya understand that healing from betrayal trauma didn't mean learning to trust everyone. It meant learning to trust the right people for the right reasons. Maya began to appreciate the difference between healthy caution and paralyzing fear. When Maya finally did start dating again, she was amazed by how different it felt to build relationships based on honesty rather than performance. She no longer felt pressure to be perfect or to present an image of having everything figured out. Instead, she focused on getting to know people as they really were and allowing them to know her authentic self. Maya kept Patricia on retainer, not for more investigations, but as a consultant to help her develop better instincts about people's motivations. Patricia taught her how to research new business associates appropriately and how to recognize behaviors that might indicate deceptive intentions, but Maya also learned to balance healthy caution with openness to genuine connections. She had realized that while her experience with Ryan and Jessica had been traumatic, it didn't mean that everyone was untrustworthy. It meant that trust needed to be earned gradually through consistent actions over time. The most important change in Maya's life was her relationship with herself. She had stopped trying to maintain a perfect image and instead focused on building a life that felt authentic and sustainable. She no longer worked excessive hours to prove her worth or spent money on things that were supposed to impress other people. Maya's new motto, which she kept written on a card in her wallet, read, "Trust actions more than words, and trust your instincts more than explanations." She had learned that people's true intentions were revealed through patterns of behavior over time, not through what they said during individual conversations. Looking back, Maya could see that her experience with Ryan and Jessica, while devastating at the time, had ultimately led her to a much better life. She had learned to value genuine relationships over impressive ones, financial security over the appearance of wealth, and personal authenticity over social approval. Maya's business was now more successful than it had ever been, but success felt different than it used to. Instead of working frantically to maintain an image of perfection, she focused on providing excellent service to clients while maintaining healthy boundaries in all her relationships. She had also developed a network of genuine friendships with people who knew her real story and supported her authentic self. These relationships felt completely different from her previous social connections, which had been based more on mutual benefit than genuine care. Maya realized that while she couldn't change what had happened to her, she could control what she learned from the experience and how she used those lessons to build a better future. The woman who had once been obsessed with appearing successful had become genuinely successful by focusing on truth, authenticity, and healthy relationships built on mutual respect and trust.